Welcome to this edition of Brains Trust. My guest today is Preeti Reddy. Preeti is the chairperson of Cantor, the successor to Indian Market Research Bureau, one of India's premier market research agencies. And if I may say, she is now the grand czarina of market research in India. And I'm very happy to have her with us this afternoon. Preeti, welcome to Brains Trust. And my first question to you is, where is the Indian consumer as we speak today from where you are, and how is it looking?
The way it's looking is the Indian consumer was on a major consumption journey after years of abstinence. Some of that, and that was driven by the fact that they were getting richer, they were getting more exposed to what is available, and of course, we are a young population, so a young population wants to also consume. I have to say that the pandemic has actually brought that to a bit of a halt. But the Indian consumer is very resilient. They have seen many economic downturns in the past and they have carried on. So it seems like post this pandemic now, they go back on their consumption journey. They are consuming, especially the younger ones, are consuming experiences more than, more than just materialistic apparel or durables or anything. So they are evolving, and as anything that is Indian, there is so much diversity in the consumer and in what they consume and how they consume and how they eat, that as a researcher and somebody who watches consumers, it's a fascinating journey. How they are evolving, how they're evolving differently. But I think many people know that this is happening to the Indian consumer, internet penetration, telecom, more money in their hands, all of that. There are some things that I think I would like to emphasize, to say that there are some things that don't change and are not going to change for some time. One is that even for the next 15 years, we will still be largely a rural economy. We're 70% rural even now. As population, 57% of consumption is rural. That's not going to change in a hurry. The second thing that will not change is, and we have seen it in consumers, is the family as the center of their lives. Family will remain important. The nature of the family might change, from say joint families to nuclear family. Actually, people are going back to joint families, single parent households, etc. But the family will remain important. The third thing that will not change, that has not changed, is the importance of religion. Religion is extremely important. It's becoming even more important, as you know, but they're finding technology as the technology is coming to their rescue in their religious rituals. For instance, now they have darshan through Zoom calls, and if you have to write the Gayatri mantra some 108 times or something, they do a cut and paste job on their computer. So their technology is doing that. So those things are not changing. And fourth, and I keep saying this, the most concerning thing is that the role of women and the proportion of women, both in the country and in the workforce, is actually dropping.
So my question to you is that I just can't understand how this number in terms of percentage of women in workforce is changing. And it's sort of reversing. I can't understand why that is happening. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, I mean, as a growing economy with better education, lower fertility, etc., we should actually see more women participating. One is that when there are no jobs, the first jobs that go are women's jobs. That's one. The second is that they're still very bound by social norms and conventions as to, why should you work? Or they do work. They work at home, but they're not paid for it. To work outside home, there are really a lot of family constraints, and secondly, there are infrastructure constraints, meaning that it is just not safe. It's not safe for you to. You have to be really careful if you have to do what a man is doing. And we have not, as a country, been able to provide that, and it's as simple as that. So, when we work in multinational companies in metro cities, we are very concerned about our women, women workers. We look after their safety. We make sure that they're dropped home, in a car when they work late, etc. But actually, the workplace is their haven or it's their safety net, because when they go home, they're not, they have to do the whole housework. They have to look after children. They have to look after, when they have old parents, the burden falls on them. So even if they enter at various stages, they just drop out because it is seen as their job to do all of this.
Preeti, to your point that Indians are becoming more religious, which is obvious from the recent Pew Research which was published a few months back, but it says that Indians continue to be tolerant with each other. And what's your take on that in terms of what's happening?
I think the Pew Research says that they are saying we will, yes, there are different religions and we will tolerate the other religions. I think that when you use the word tolerance, it is more tolerate other religions. We will not intermingle religions. That's what they're saying. So they've famously described India, somebody's famously described India not as a melting pot or etc., but as a thali. So everybody has their place, and please maintain your place and please don't interfere with us, So I don't know if that is real tolerance.
So does that have an impact on economic growth and consumption, according to you? Does this attitude have an impact?
Any inequality has an impact on economic growth. The more people that come, that move up in the economic ladder, the more prosperous a country becomes. So an women and men inequality, why is it important? Not only because it's important for women to have autonomy, but also because you are keeping away half the population that could be a consuming population. Similarly, if you keep minorities, if you undermine minorities and don't let them prosper, you are, some 30% of your population is out of the market. So it's just, just pure commercial sense makes for us to be more equal in the way we treat each other. We have differences, we should respect those, but economic differences should not be there.
Preeti, I saw an interview with Christine Lagarde, the head of IMF, and she was asked what are the two critical issues the world is facing today, and if she had a silver wand to address two issues, what would those be? And she mentioned climate change, and the second was inequality in income distribution. We all know that the Indian population is about 1,300 million plus, but out of this 1,300 million, what kind of numbers make up the addressable market for any business? Not for telecom alone, which is pretty deeply penetrated, but other categories.
That's a number that's been debated many times, and it keeps varying depending on whatever. It ranges from 200 million to some 10 million, etc. The number has grown larger. It has definitely grown larger. Incomes have grown 7 times in the last 3 decades or so. But we are still, I think, at about 7 to 8% of our population, which is really the what we call the rich, affluent consuming class.
So according to you, this number is about 50 to 60 million. So in India, about 50 to 60 million consumers are as rich as consumers in Europe and North America, and the rest of it, you feel, kind of starts falling off?
They are consuming, they are moving up, they are, let's not deny them that. And they want to. The fact is that they want to consume.
Preeti, I hear you say something which is very interesting. What you're pointing out is that it makes great economic sense if the distribution of income was to be more smooth and equitable, because there's a great growth story embedded in that, in which what will happen is that it will benefit those who are already rich, because the consumer class will increase in very large numbers, and that'll create a virtuous economic cycle. Can you elaborate upon that?
What I meant was that if you keep your population poor, or your market is then restricted. So if you're if you're a multinational corporation that is selling detergent or tea or any FMCG product, it is in your economic interest to make sure that people are able to economically buy your product. Otherwise, you're talking about a restricted market. There is only so much that they can consume. They are not going to consume, 8 cups of tea suddenly if what they want to do is 4 cups. So it is. It just makes eminent economic sense to make sure that your market expands, and the way to do that is to reduce inequality.
So you think redistribution of wealth through fiscal intervention would actually generate very large businesses across consumer categories?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm saying, you look at our staff, you look at people who work with us. If you could just give them 10,000 rupees more a month, as we were saying, they will consume. They will consume either education or health or FMCG. They will use that money, or they will, and that's a huge fillip. So it will be like a self-sustaining cycle in that sense. So that intervention that we're talking about is absolutely critical. I think everybody can see that that's the way to overcome what the pandemic has taken us back so many years.
Preeti, to our conversation, you mentioned that there could be many mini Indias emerging within India, and there's an example. For example, 15 to 20 years back, when language television and language programming started, we found that there was a sudden surge in language content as against only, say, English or Hindi. So, do you believe that the Indian consumer is behaving differently in different parts of the country, and the diversity is showing up and the richness is showing up, and that needs to be taken into account when we are marketing products?
They're very different. They're very diverse. The diversity, if anything, is increasing, because it is through what has happened in the last 10 years or so. I think that the sense of identity as where they come from, their ethnic identity sense is becoming very strong. And we've always been a very diverse country. Anybody who understands that, any marketer who understands that, has actually done well. That diversity is, as like I said, actually increasing, and there is great pride in that. That I'm a Tamilian, or I'm a Bengali, or I'm a Malayali, or whatever. You can see it in films, for instance. The Malayalam cinema, Telugu cinema, all of that is, they're huge industries by themselves. So this one nation, one Hindi is, it's a bit of a disaster, I think. I don't think it will go down well with anybody, because they're becoming very proud of their ethnic origins.
And is the Indian consumer changing? And you see it from the softer side, because you see this day in and day out. In addition to the huge quantitative data that you get to see, you also see a lot of qualitative data. So how is the Indian changing, particularly the young Indian? How are they changing, and what are the changes?
So the young India that we study is largely urban India, the metros and the tier 1 towns. And they are quite international, because they have access to, to what's happening in the rest of the world. They are, some of the changes that they are bringing about are actually very welcome changes, because they are especially what we call Gen Z, the current generation, people who are between 6 to 25 years or so. They are, and even the millennials, which are the 30 to 40-year-olds, they are concerned with international, global issues. They are concerned about climate change. They are concerned about the fact that in many countries democracy is under threat. They are concerned about, they are much less materialistic in terms, I mean, in our time we wanted a house, we wanted a car, we wanted whatever, we wanted to save money. They're less like that. They don't want to own anything. They want experiences rather than assets or materialistic, owning materialistic things. They don't want cars, they don't want houses. And I think they will save us, because they are worried about the world that we're leaving behind. They're worried about, they have a social conscience. And you have seen that many of them actually have a activist conscience. And they're all the young people, and particularly women. You can see how women are, which is really welcome in that generation. Those are the changes we are seeing.
You say this, and I find it very interesting, because on social media, some of the most vociferous, wholesome and critical people on any issue around the world are women. So I find it very interesting. I mean, you look at, a Barkha Dutt, a Swati Chaturvedi, a Suhasini Haider, a Faye D'Souza, a Meenakshi Lekhi. There might be around 100, 200 of these women who show a lot more spine in them than men.
I think they will, like I said, I think they will save us. I mean, look at the CA in whatever protests. It was led by women, right? Look at those girls, that Pinjara Tod, when they came. Look at they're fearless, and and their body language when they came out. Remember that when during the CA, that girl who was protecting that boy. So I think once you give women agency, they are, I think, their concerns with social issues, with their empathy with the poor and the marginalized is much higher, much higher.
So there are three things which you mentioned, which to my mind are very, very important. The first is you feel that it's very important to bring more women into the economic fold, and it's got great economic benefits. I think that was the first thing you mentioned. The second thing you mentioned is sorting this income distribution, and you feel that income distribution is more equitable. It makes a great case for economic growth. And the third thing you mentioned is that prosperity always follows peace. So in this section, if you can just size up these three and build a great economic case around these big ideas that you have, and if you can elaborate upon that.
I think it's obvious to anybody that who looks at the economy, who watches consumers, that these are the three things that will make a difference.
So if you can just elaborate upon that.
So women, I'm saying women would be, they should be part of the workforce, because they're half the population. You are losing a lot of, what shall I say, positive energy, and when you keep women out of the workforce. There are estimates that if you just increase women's participation by 7% or something, then I don't remember the number, but your GDP goes up by some huge number. So they are they are they hold up half the earth, you know what I mean? So there is no reason why they should be marginalized like this. The second thing was about income equality, and the point that I'm making about that is that if growth is your objective, then growth can only come when there are more people consuming. That just having a very small restricted set of people consuming is dysfunctional. It's actually dysfunctional because after some time, your market will dry up. And what was the third one?
The third was prosperity follows peace.
Yeah. Now, if if people are struggling all the time, and if people are fighting each other all the time, and you are doing, and society is divisive, then where will you have prosperity? Where will you have the time to sit back and say, that I want to work towards the prosperity of my community, my country, my state, whatever it may be. If you are protesting and lynching and doing all of that, where is the time to think about your community, for instance? And also, I mean, India has a very strong entrepreneurial. I mean, we're an entrepreneurial people. If you just let the entrepreneur in us free and don't restrict us and don't make it hard for us to do business, you don't need to do anything else. You just need to do 2 or 3 things. Give money to those who don't have it so that they can consume and generate more money. Let more women come into the workforce. And the third is, let us be free. Don't divide us, don't restrict us, don't have policy that make it easy for us, because finally we're Indians, we want to do the best for our country. And there's no, you've seen when you do that, how well our entrepreneurs do. So those are in my view the things that consumers are telling us we need to do.
Preeti, so how do you see India 10 years from now if all this was done and done well?
India can be I would like to see an India that is prosperous. I would like to see an India where poverty is almost abolished. But I would also like to see an India that, I mean, this is my personal view, and I think that our younger people will help us do that. That has learned from the mistakes of the other other economies, and we don't make the same mistakes again. Climate change is important. It is very important. It is not a concern for anybody in India, but it should be. It should be. We should consume, but how we consume has to be different. And we have very old traditions of responsible consumption. Maybe we need to go back to those. The recycling, the refilling, all the things that we used to do, or our parents and grandparents used to do. Those were very responsible ways of consuming. So I think we need to bring some of that back. And I mean, if India can do that, then we forget the US and China, we would be way ahead.
Preeti, it was fantastic having you on the show. It was really wonderful having a conversation with you. All the very best, and thank you.